those adorable death machines. Some b.o.ws are very effective in killing their target.
Back for another video. And today I'm reacting to Resident Evil, 10 of the biggest b.o.ws and monsters. Even though b.o.ws are bioweapons, which, yeah, it stands for bioweapon, probably. So, we're about to literally get into this video. Let's go.
Some are intelligent, and some are just huge. As if it wasn't enough that they're already scary, you gotta make them huge, like the size of Boulder Redfield's biceps. Well, let's take a look at some of the biggest b.o.ws in Resident Evil. First up, we have El Gigante, aka Dakota Fanny. I'm sorry, Dakota. El Gigante b.o.ws are usually around 22 to 23 feet tall, which is pretty comparable to about a 2-story building. If it wasn't for the hunchback and the very disgusting face, bulging eyeballs, El Gigante's features are pretty proportionate to its body size. Big arms, big legs, big toes, big toenails. So it's like this big human but also troll mutation. Some unfortunate victims were given Las Plagas forcefully and they mutated into El Gigantes. You would think bigger means better, but unfortunately for Sadler and Los Illuminados, El Gigantes have a very bad temperament and are extremely hard to control. Therefore, they only produced a few. Could you imagine how many people died trying to train at least one to, I don't know, sit down, play fetch with the tree trunk? I mean, it's nearly impossible, I would imagine. The Gigante found in Resident Evil 4 only has one plaga, and it only took a little Leon Kennedy and the help of his wolf friend to destroy the one plaga found on its body. But in Resident Evil 5, you have the Endezu type of Gigante. And while comparable in size, the Endezu have multiple plagas attached to their bodies, making them a little bit harder to kill. Next up, we have William Birkin G Stage 5, aka Stinkhole. Mr. Dr. William Birkin, you definitely deserve the fate of a disgusting monster, because William is definitely a monster inside. William Birkin's efforts were monumental in developing the T-virus, which killed, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of people at this point. So it's only fair that William got the taste of his own medicine that he created in order to become the monster known as G. So William's G1 stage, he was still relatively clothed. He just kind of looks like a guy that took too many steroids. And then G2 happened, he looks a little bit more monstrous. G3, he looks like a full-on monster. And William's G4 stage can have a spot on this list because he's pretty big in the remake. It's actually pretty hard to identify the actual height because it's a bulbous gelatinous that grows in and out. But then you get the G5 subway size William Birkin. I would estimate that it's about a quarter of a train car. The thing is, the mutation keeps growing, so we don't know for sure. It's still a gigantic mass of b.o.w juice and other ungodly chemicals. And in the center of it all, a disgusting chewing and gnawing mouth with like swords for teeth or something. Definitely not one of the taller b.o.ws in relative size, but surely one of the wider ones and ever-growing blobs. Next up, we have Ogroman, aka Shrek IRL. There's very little known about Ogromans and their origins, but they are probably derived from humans being experimented on with the C virus found in Resident Evil 6. The Ogroman are a little over 30 feet tall, making them taller than El Gigantes and the same height as a 3-story building. You guys gotta watch the first scene where the Ogroman's introduced in Resident Evil 6. I mean, the Ogroman is lifted in by a helicopter, like it only weighs a sack of oranges. Very interesting how the departure between the Ogroman and the helicopter is like an awakening. Once this thing is separated from its body, it completely wakes up and is fully enraged. It's almost like a technique to make it psychologically more angry and hostile towards its victims. Now, this thing was created to obviously not only kill people and devour them, but also to provide huge amounts of damage towards buildings in place of a bomb, you know? And so the Ogroman is basically an explosive with legs. Next up, we have Jack Baker, aka a decent family man. Now, as a human, Jack Baker is pretty tall on his own. I think he's a little bit taller than the average male person. But after driving a chainsaw through Jack's body, and not only that, he lost a chainsaw duel to a man who just lost his hand. Now, there's no trophy for that. After his encounter with Ethan, he mutates into this warehouse-sized b.o.w. He grabs Ethan like the little twig that he is, and he has some pretty good one-liners, like listen to this one. So Jack's mold infusion, with a little bit of help from Evelyn, evolves Jack into this huge mass filled with eyeballs, different limbs, a huge head, and a pretty big potty mouth. Now I think that this is Capcom's interpretation or effort to include a gigantic boss fight in a very monotone, serious, different Resident Evil game, and it's pretty damn well done. I love how they didn't make Jack Baker just a scary, muted monster. He's got some personality to him. I mean, this is Jack Baker we're talking about here. And in Mega Jack's final moments, when he becomes a molded statue, we get a clear sense of how big this thing actually is. It's pretty scary, but not that scary when it's like cursing you out. Next up, we have Ramon Salazar, aka Napoleon. Don't you just love how poetic it is that I included Ramon Little Mini Salazar in this list? Actually, it brings a tear to my eye. Now, of course, Ramon is the maniacal king coward of Resident Evil 4, extremely sadistic, privileged, and as you probably already know, has a Napoleon complex. When little Ramon has his back against the wall and Leon S. Kennedy is just about to catch him, he merges himself with one of his Verdugo bodyguards, pretty gross, and levels up into a cathedral-sized monster. The entire boss area is filled with Ramon, and that's pretty gross to say, but it's true because its living tissue surrounds the entire walls. I don't think there's an area that this thing doesn't cover. It's pretty damn hard to say what the exact size is of the mutated Ramon, but I mean, come on, it's a room-filled monster. Now, I don't know if we should only reward Ramon Salazar's name to this list because he is a central part of this monster. He's got a little pocket to himself that opens up every time he's weakened, but it just makes so much sense poetically. It's beautiful even that this little guy becomes this gigantic monster, which he is, at the final stages of his life. Good riddance, you little dweeb. Next up, we have Del Lago, aka Harpoon Lover. Now we're getting into some really big wet boy territory. The Del Lago is 65 feet 7 inches in size, a little bit over 20 meters, which is roughly the size of 2 school buses put together. Now, believe it or not, Del Lago, this gigantic monster, was once a tiny little salamander. Of course, it was given some Las Plagas juice, and then Del Lago grew and it grew until it couldn't fit in any laboratory, was thrown into a lake and fed dead corpses. I mean, I guess that's its favorite dish. I know we're just talking about video games and it's all pretend land, but when I explored the Del Lago Swamp Lake thing, it was pretty mind-boggling to see the exact size of this gargantuan monster. Yes, I'm gonna say it, it was breathtaking. A little underwater joke for you. As for the boss fight itself, it's kind of annoying in my opinion. The perspective can be a little bit hard to track Del Lago. Especially when you get to professional mode, it gets even trickier. And by the way, I hate harpoons, I just do. Let's fill this Del Lago with my bullets and rockets. Next up we have Malacoda, aka Holy Fuck. Now if you ever wondered what Godzilla would look like in Resident Evil, you have the Malacoda, a beast of biblical proportions, whose name, Malacoda, actually derives from Malebolge, a demon from the 8th circle of hell. I know I'm pronouncing that wrong. You gotta take an extended period of time when you're trying to describe what you're looking at when you look at the Malacoda. Because there's 20 feet of monster here, there's 20 feet of monster there, there's 20 feet of monster underneath the water which we can't even see. I mean, it's pandemonium. And it makes sense why it's hard to describe the Malacoda because its inception is a little bit complicated. The Malacoda are actually tiny little worms that are infected with the T abyss, and those worms act as parasites that enter into a host, and that host begins to grow. And it just so happens that the Malacoda worms went into a whale, so that's the gargantuan beast you're looking at. So it's a mixture of little parasitic worms and a whale, so that's the Malacoda. And this thing is trying to swallow an entire ship. Just to give you a brief idea of how gigantic it is. Now, it's on a personal level that I find the Malacoda extremely terrifying. Being alone at sea with a gigantic monster, whatever phobia that is, I have that. It's really scary. At the end of the day, the Malacoda might just be the biggest monster on this list. with 4 large tentacle claw things, a whale's body, which by the way, the host doesn't have to be alive in order for the Malacoda parasites to work. So we're probably looking at a dead whale body here. Its mouth has some more Malacoda insects inside. It's a pretty cool design, I'm not gonna lie. And at the bottom of the Malacoda's body, another worm mouth thing. God damn it, this thing is so terrifying. Next up, we have the Nemesis, aka No-Nose Bitch. Now, the Nemesis is a pretty big beefy boy in his base form.
Alright, this video is going to be 2 parts, so I'm going to end this part here. Luddites, my good friends.